Just a note that this podcast may touch on difficult themes and include some challenging conversations, so please take care when listening. This is The Widow Diaries, a podcast that holds space for the often unspoken stories of grief, love and life after loss as a young widow. I'm Caroline Winter, and like so many, I've been on this journey. So come with me each episode and hear from others who've also walked the winding path of widowhood in their own way. The Widow Diaries, for First Light Widowed support, where no story is the same and every story matters. Going back to work after my husband Richard died was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I returned about 5 weeks after he passed away. Of course, it's different for everyone. But my employer was incredibly supportive. They eased me back in gently, but even then, grief had a way of showing up when I least expected it. There were definitely moments running to the bathroom to cry, and there were days when I just couldn't make it through the door at all. Work can be a lifeline after loss, but knowing what to ask for and what you need isn't always clear, and that's why this conversation matters so much. Kate Nuttall understands this journey deeply, both as a human resources manager and as a widow. After losing her husband, Tim, she navigated returning to work, raising a family and rebuilding her life. And now, as she prepares to sell the home they shared for 20 years and look ahead to a new chapter with her partner, Peter, she's got some practical advice. For anyone facing that same path. Kate, thank you for being a guest on The Widow Diaries.
It is my absolute pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Now, Kate, you're at a really interesting pivot point in your journey, so I think we might start there. You're actually about to sell up and move out of the home that you and your late husband Tim shared after 20 years, and you're heading off on the next part of your journey. How are you feeling about that?
You know, if you had have put this to me 5 years ago, I would have been staunch about, no, that's not happening. But something has, I guess, more of a lightness, I would describe it as, has sort of come over me, and I feel a bit more enabled. I think one of the things that I promised Tim was that I would make sure all our kids had an education, and my last one is now in year 12, and they're all thriving, and it's time, I think, finally for me to do something that is for me. And so I feel very at peace with it. As much as there's so many lovely memories in this house, I also think that it's time for someone else to come in and create lovely memories here as well.
It's lovely to hear that you've got to that stage and that you can, move somewhere else and move to another state completely from where you are, which is also exciting. What sort of new memories are you hoping to make with this move?
Well, probably some of them are almost a continuation of a little family phrase that we have, which is adventure. So I worked in airlines for a long time, so did Tim. So we've always liked to go and travel the world. So sort of freeing myself up to do that with my new partner, Peter, is very exciting. I also think, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I also think I just need to rest and be still for a while. It's been it'll be 9 years this year since Tim passed away, and the kids were so young at the time, and it's really just been a very full-on decade, So I'm also looking forward to just doing some things that fill my cup. So whether it's walking the dogs in the sunshine or it's reading a book, I just am relishing the thought of having some peaceful time where my head's not running with school sports or school fees or tuck shop or all those things. So I am just going to, at least for the first, I might be check in with me maybe after the first 12 to 24 months, but the first 12 months, I think I am just going to recover.
It sounds much needed and quite delightful, to be honest. Kate, let's go back to before 2017. Tell us about Tim, your husband, how you met, and what kind of guy was he?
Well, I love telling the story of how we met. So we were both mature age students. So we were doing our master's degree at UWA in Perth. And the icebreaker was introduce the person next to you. So learn a bit about them and then introduce them back to the rest of the group. So that was how we met. Yeah.
He was your partner and you had to introduce him to the group.
He was my partner, yeah. Now, funnily enough, he was actually engaged to someone else at the time. I didn't break up the engagement, but I remember that as one of the facts. And anyway, we were in a class together for, that would have been about 12 months. And then I remember he sent me a text at work. We were also in project groups together. So we was probably spending, a week a night together on projects and things. And we both worked in human resources. But I remember he sent me a text that said, I'm now... engagement didn't work out. I'm available for weddings, bar mitzvahs, or Christmas parties, and it was around the 23rd of December. So I actually had friends over from Melbourne that night, and we went out for dinner, and we were together ever since. So he had been married before, and he had two fairly young children. Then I'd say they were about 8 and 14, or maybe 8 and 12, but. He was a fabulous dad, and we had 3 children together who he also adored. He's hardworking. So I really, really miss this aspect of Tim. Tim could fix anything. Mm-hmm. So very handy, would love to sort of work things out. He was a problem solver. So he always would have a crack at things, full of energy, mad Carlton supporter, as was I, which made my dad happy because we were a Carlton family. Really, he was very... He was working in a corporate role when I met him, but he certainly wasn't corporate. And then through the course of, our lives together, he took on his own business, which we can talk about in terms of work as well. Took on his own business, which he just loved. So he was out in the gardens, working with his hands, just absolutely loving and people. Like he loved people. So I remember we spent a period of time in New Zealand where people would refer to me as, "Oh, you're Tim's wife," because he was always out and about in the village.
That sums him up beautifully. I've got a nice picture of who Tim was. And you had 17 years together.
Yes, we had a long time together and 3 kids during that time and lots of adventures. So it was a lovely, fulfilling marriage and life together.
If you're comfortable with it, can you talk about losing Tim? It was completely unexpected, wasn't it?
Yeah. I had quite a big job at the time, and he loved camping, me not so much. And it was the school holidays, so still don't love it. The September school holidays at the time, and he decided that he would take the kids away. So they were just going to. He'd hired a camper van sort of thing, and they were going to go for. I think it was about 10 days around Victoria, and he wasn't feeling well when he left. And I still remember, I was sort of shocked about it, but I sort of can be a bit more candid about it now. But I remember sort of going, it's just a dose of man flu and, take a Panadol and off you go. And anyway, they were touring around and he said to me, I'm really starting to feel crook. And I said, well, do you think you should come back? And he was committed. He was, no, we're going to do this. And I told the kids we're going to go here. And anyway, it turned out he had influenza A, and he just didn't get on top of that fast enough. And I was quite worried I could tell when I was talking to him that he wasn't well, which was so unlike him, like very fit, very healthy sort of guy. As I said, outdoors, sort of quite manual, so strong. And my eldest son, who was he would have been about 12 at the time, rang me and said, "Mum, I'm really worried about Dad." And so I went up, and they were in Tokemall at the time. I went up, and I can remember leaving work. Why won't he just go to the doctor? And anyway, when I found him, I took him straight to emergency, and by the time he got into the hospital, he'd had pneumonia, and basically then his organs shut down. It was very, very quick. So he left on the Saturday. The following Saturday, he passed away. And I saw him on that Thursday, and I was with him all that Friday night. So I also now often go, ha ha, because he passed away on what was grand final day, which makes me think now that that's such a Tim thing to do. He has now 2 days that we remember him, which is grand final day because it moves around, and the 30th of September. So, so it was really unexpected. And just, I guess if anything, I'm grateful that it was, it was fast, but it was just such a shock.
Yeah.
Such a shock.
Especially for someone, as you say, who's, so fit and healthy and mobile, and you don't think that is the way that perhaps someone like that would be taken.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I can remember sort of saying to the doctor, but surely he's going to be okay. Look at him. And yeah, he was. I can remember when I went into ICU, the head of ICU showed me a X-ray of his lungs, and I knew when I saw those, like, they were dark. It wasn't going to be a good outcome. So it's still, I think, as most of us that are widowed, you will never forget it. You will never forget it.
Of course not. Has it changed the way that you or your children approach health or think about your health?
I would. One thing is I was, not an anti-vaxxer. I wasn't really. I sort of think I'm strong enough to fight off the flu, but I'm a huge advocate for the flu injection. Every year I make sure that, I work for an organisation that's big enough to be able to provide it for people. So I make sure that we do have that as an option. And same with the kids. I would say I'm very, I found COVID incredibly difficult because people would talk about things like flu-like symptoms. That was very, I don't know if it was triggering, but it was a very anxious time for me and the children, because they were obviously the symptoms that Tim had. But I think now we are, we're on it. I actually got the flu quite badly last year, and the kids were so worried. So
I can imagine.
That was really, sensitive to that. So, I think we've always been, I would say, a health conscious family, but, I think we're probably we take up the prevention more than what we would have. Yeah.
Kate, when he died, where were you in life and work at the time, knowing that you were both, quite high achievers and career was obviously very important to you as well as family?
Yeah, well, when Tim passed away, so just before that, we had both. So my daughter, who's now about to turn 18, she must have been about 4, and we both decided that was a good time. So the kids were about 4, 6 and 8, and we both decided that might be a good time to sort of throw caution to the wind and throw in our jobs and go overseas. Mm-hmm. And so Tim had got a redundancy, and he was in a process for a job over in the UAE. So we were both working in airlines at the time. So he was in a process over there. And I remember thinking how wonderful my life was going to be, because I was just going to be an expat wife and, hang out at clubs and raise the children.
Lunches,
and
etc.
then I had two opportunities. One was China, and the other was New Zealand. And at that time, the global financial crisis occurred, and sort of, I think, made most of the expat deals not very attractive to either organisations or to people. And so we ended up going to New Zealand, which wasn't quite the exotic change that we had anticipated, but it was perfect for us at the time. And I got a job with Air New Zealand, and when we were over there, Tim decided that actually he was going to settle the kids in and, just threw himself into community. So his dad was actually a Kiwi, so he was the school dad, and he did the sailing lessons, and he did the rugby or the touch rugby, and he did cricket, and he just really did all of the things with the kids, which was really good because the role that I took on had far more travel than what I had anticipated. So I was away, at least a week a month, sometimes 10 days a month. So basically he was the wind beneath my wings. And so we backed my career, and he took a back seat for a while. While we were over there, a role came up back in Australia, and I can remember us having a conversation. We always used to sit down New Year's Eve, and we would reflect on the year and think about what we wanted to challenge ourselves for the year ahead. And I can remember saying our oldest was just about finished primary school and saying to Tim, I think we should give it one more year here, and then we're going to have to make a call about whether we go back to Australia or not, because if we don't, we'll end up here forever. And I still have such a big place in my heart for New Zealand. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful country. But anyway, as life happens, about 2 weeks after that, I got a call from someone that I'd worked with previously who said, I have a job for you. Please come and take it. And I said to Tim, this just isn't going to happen. When I say this isn't going to happen, I said to him, this is just a brilliant job. It's a great opportunity. I love this woman that's also offered it to me. And so we packed up and we moved home. And then that just sort of, from there, I think I just had a sort of a series of big roles, and Tim was, as I said, just the wind beneath my wings and the enabler for me to be able to take on those sorts of, big corporate-y, heavy going, long hour type travel type roles. So, and that was, that worked for both of us. He then, once all the kids were at school, he then took up a Jim's Mowing type franchise. Well, not type, it was a Jim's Mowing franchise. So he could just do his hours during school hours. So he got to do both of the things that he loved, which was like be out working and in the community and chatting on all the local gossip and being around for all of the kids stuff. So that worked really well for us. Yeah.
Well, in hindsight, that also meant he spent a lot more time with the children, unbeknown to you at the time, obviously, but that really precious time, right?
Yeah, I think about that so often.
Yeah.
It was really precious time. It really was. And in fact, just as part of this, as we're talking about part of the packing up and moving, I went down the wormhole yesterday of finding photo albums, and he was, there's so many sports captains, and he was coach, and there was just lots of beautiful memories sitting in a few of those boxes around the time he spent with the kids.
Yeah, that's a wonderful silver lining, which we always look for in these moments.
Yeah.
So at that time, you were obviously, your career was flying, you were raising a family. What then was, I guess, the most unexpected part of grieving, especially someone who was also managing, work and children, and suddenly you've lost your other half?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of, I guess, unexpected. I mean, look, I still look back at some of that period and I don't actually even remember. But I think on a positive side, this little community, I mean, I live in sort of a fairly rural town just outside of Melbourne, and this community just absolutely gathered around me. So the kids never missed a sporting, lesson or training session. People just came and made it all happen around me. So I'm forever grateful for that. I think from a work perspective at that time too, I was very fortunate. My boss was also my boss at Air New Zealand, and I followed her to a role here in Australia, and she she just gave me some time off, like just extended leave. And I think, the organisation was big enough that they could afford to do that. So that was, that was great. And I absolutely could not have, I just didn't have the brain capacity to go back to work. But I think some of the things that, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? But I think some of the things that really surprised me or shocked me is just how inadequate bereavement leave is for people. Like it's just so shit. Like, how can you only get 2 to 3 days when when you're trying to? It's not even enough to plan a funeral, let alone get your thoughts together. So I think that's been with both my HR hat on and as someone that's lost a partner, I think we are just really it's not something that we have considered as a society and people's capacity to come back to work in such a short time.
I'd like to really delve into that more deeply as we go along. And I, like you, was very supported by my organisation, and given the time I needed when I came back, it was as much or as little as I could, but not everybody gets that. So can we talk about returning to work more generally? How long is a piece of string? It's different for everybody.
Yeah.
But what influenced your decision and the timing for you to return?
Well, to be really frank with you, I think it was fear was probably the main driver. So after, that hideous period where your world's upended, I had this realization that now it was all on me. It was all on me. The kids were really young. Education's very important to me, and I wanted them to, continue their schooling. And I think if that was one of the things, I was probably really strict on them in returning to school. So they, I can remember one of my sons saying to me at one point, like, we're at school, why aren't you at work? And I thought, good point. But I pushed them back to school. And mind you, I went and did pickups and all sorts of random things during that time. But education is very important to both Tim and I. So, this sort of prospect, my oldest was only in year 7. So I had, 3 of them to get through high school. We had a mortgage, and so I was like, I can't lose my job. I just can't lose my job. So I really went, I think, from a, live to work type mindset to a work to live mindset. So, and I didn't, I love what I do, and I'm very passionate about HR and the difference that, a good HR practice and leadership can make in organisations. But that wasn't what my driver was during that time. My driver was solely about me and income and, keeping a roof on our heads and meals on the table and all of those sorts of things. And I reflect on that a lot now, because I'm now back in a role that I absolutely love. I love the organisation. I love what I do. I love my team, and I feel purposeful again. So it's a real interesting reflection to think about how that shifted, and also I would say my satisfaction and performance at work was not the same when I was working to live as opposed to living to work, which is something I can say now in hindsight. But I don't think that you have the capacity really to, make those really insightful and purposeful choices. You will be driven by whatever is right for you at that time. And, I've spoken to lots of widows about this, and for some it's a distraction. I just need to go back to work because I can't be in the house, or I don't want to be looking at this. I want to go back and use my brain on something that is completely outside of my grief or my life. And there are others that, it's a financial, not even a decision, a need.
An imperative,
so yeah, that's right. So, I think it's, I recognise that your capacity to really digest and think clearly in those early days is very, very limited. But I would encourage people to consider why they're working. And then I think if you can understand why, then you can understand what you need to enable that a little better. And then I think that then helps that scenario. Even, it might be short term, it might be long term, you can always revisit it. But I think I didn't really equate this shift, as I said, from, absolutely this passion living to work to working to live, and how that actually impacted my enjoyment at work, my fulfillment. It wasn't necessarily satisfying, and I wasn't doing a good job. And the thing that I feared the most was that I would lose my job, and I did lose my job. I was made redundant would have been about a year after.
Oh, gosh.
And again, in hindsight, it's the best thing that happened. But at the time, I remember just thinking, I cannot believe that this is happening. Like, what am I going to do now? And I did get another job, and I got a job in an organisation that really, I think, helped my healing. So, I think there's, it's difficult to navigate through at the time, because it's not the only thing that you've got to deal with or you're thinking about, but it's such it's such an important part of your life if you're working and you're spending, sometimes 40, 50 hours in this place. So taking some time to think about what you need is really important. And it might just be what you need in the short term, but it will just help that energy and that, just getting some lightness and some purpose back, I think.
You've obviously lived it, as have many of our listeners, and some might be in the throes of returning to work now. What kind of conversations should people be having or be considering when they're returning to work, both with their manager or team, or maybe just letting work colleagues know, perhaps what they need in the sense that you talked about, that need and support on returning?
Great questions. I tend to divide this into two things. So one is, I think, just thinking about what you need from a workplace. So do you need more flexibility? There is, I would thoroughly recommend for people to jump onto Fair Work and just have a look at what employers, like, there's a lot of obligations on employers these days that can really help you in that period. So it might be, it might be more flexible work, it might be flexible start or finish times. So I think all of those things are absolutely on the table for conversations. So thinking about what you need, and it might be that some days you just need to leave early. So I think there's no right or wrong, is what I would say. You need what you need. And if I think about, what did I need back then, and just to help people maybe structure their thinking, I needed a job that did not have travel. That was off the table for me at that period of time. I needed reasonable hours. So, I still wanted to be there for the kids and being able to do some of those after school activities. I couldn't actually cope with complex problem solving at that time. So I did have a conversation about what projects I felt I could do, things that had more flexible deadlines than being right in the heat of things where I just couldn't, my brain just couldn't cope with that. And obviously there was a financial equation that needed to work for me at that time as well. So I think sort of thinking through those sorts of aspects of what does your job require of you? Can you work from home? All of those sorts of things is really important. And then, talking to your HR team if you've got one, or talking to your manager about that flexibility is really important. You can ask for additional unpaid leave if bereavement leave is not enough.
Right.
You can use your annual leave. I would also suggest that people look at their sick leave, or it's called personal leave these days. But I had a great GP at the time, and I just used basically for my own wellness, for managing fatigue and stress and anxiety, and just got some paid sick leave. So GPs are your friends. So get a certificate and use it. Don't feel bad about using up that sick leave if that's what you need to do. Temporary, I think I've talked about temporary or reduced hours, flexible start times, maybe a gradual return to work, which is what I did. So not sort of stepping in and full on, just, I went back part-time 3 days for a month, and then I went back 4 days until I got myself back to full-time. So I think all of those sorts of things about the structure of your work week or day or month is really important to consider. But then the emotional side, which you mentioned as well, it is... again, I'm going to say hindsight is a wonderful thing because all the people-y things, as I would say, is, thinking about before you go to work. Some people have filters and some people don't. So,
so true.
So I think, like, what do you want to tell people? Do you want your manager to tell people? Do you not want to say anything? Like, think about that, because you do need to prepare yourself for questions where people will say things like, what happened? Are you okay? Or what can I do to help? And that can sort of be quite off-putting, or even, all those emotions all of a sudden are just there. So I think, prepare yourself for your own emotions. One of the things that I had a very good friend that I worked with, and she sort of made herself, I guess, available to be my buddy, if that makes it. It's the best word I can think of. And she was my person, and I would just direct people to her, or I would get her to help me have conversations when I just felt too overwhelmed. So I think, considering if you do have someone that maybe can even speak on your behalf to your manager, if you just can't do it, is worthwhile considering. But I think you really do need to think about, what do you want to tell people, and do you want to talk about it, or do you not want to talk about it? And I think that sort of setting that tone is important. I'd say there's no right or wrong. For me, I like to lead with it, because I don't like I always feel like I don't want you to feel bad, because I don't have a husband. He just died. So I tend to lead with it and say, I'm in all my new jobs now, I say, this is my story, and I was widowed, and, I'm now repartnered. But I like to be the one that puts it out there, but that's not going to work for everybody. And the other thing I would say might just be a me thing, but I have read a fair bit about grief at work. But I think what surprised me, you asked this question earlier, but what surprised me a little too was how angry I was. And when I say angry, like, the problems that people were having at work, I just, inside, I was just like screaming sometimes. It's like, this is just pointless. Like, I don't care what you do. Like, I did feel like my life had, forever changed. And I was angry at what I perceived, I guess, to be people's sort of stupid or insensitive or, questions. And, I'm past that now, but I wasn't prepared for, these thoughts that were going through my head in meetings that would have been perfectly normal a month before. And then I was sitting there thinking, who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, someone just died. And that was a really difficult period to navigate. And I knew that, sort of my emotional well-being and my mental health weren't great, but it was very difficult to combining that with this thought that I need to work because I'm now the sole carer. It's a very difficult time to navigate through. So I think for me, I had some other local widows who, I could talk to, who understood. First Light Widows Association, also great. I think EAP at work I used. I think just finding those support mechanisms is so important, because your own there's got so much going on, and then you also have to manage your own well-being and mental health and physical health. And yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot.
It really is a lot.
Yeah.
You've given some absolutely fantastic advice there, and I'm nodding along, particularly when you talk about getting angry because, well, okay, the printer's not working, but my husband died. So, and yes,
Yeah,
so I
that's right.
completely agree with that. It's interesting. A lot of what you've said there is something I think that will resonate with people because in a time of where you've lost all control, this is actually how you can take some of the control back. So how do I want these conversations to go? What is it I need from you? So almost having, being armed, I suppose, with the ability to, take some control back in the workplace so that you can make yourself feel as comfortable as possible.
Yeah. I have, each to their own, but I have, I've changed jobs twice since Tim passed away. And I have, in my interview, been very open and said, look, I'm a widow. I have a young family. I'm still working this out. I absolutely love HR. And I think that the loss of Tim is something that helps me with my compassion for people. But I also understand, we've got a business to run, and I've lived through that sort of equation of, contributing to a workplace, contributing to an organisation and community, and trying to navigate this sort of distress. And, both those jobs I got. So there you go.
It's, that's actually a nice ending to a story that I'm sure many people have gone through, and the fear that takes over, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
You mentioned before about sort of bereavement leave, the lack of. I mean, in your role as, in HR, this is something no doubt that you have possibly seen from the other side. You've been widowed yourself, but you might have seen this come through organisations that you've worked for. Is there a need to push for an increase in bereavement leave, and what's happening in that space?
Oh, I absolutely, I'm so passionate about this. I absolutely think that there is a need, and I think, as I said, I think if you think about having gone through it as we have, you're barely together in 3 days. You probably haven't even got through the funeral, let alone being able to come back to work in some sort of capacity like, oh, sorry, I was missing for 3 days. I've just lost my husband or my wife and, buried them. It is just ludicrous to me that's what we get. I do understand, that's quite an impost for small businesses and there are individual sole contractors as well. But I think for organisations, as I say, I was really lucky that I worked for an organisation which was one of the big four banks at the time who could, extend that leave to me. So I don't see much happening in that space at the moment. I think it's not something that I've seen being campaigned for, but I can see some shifts in some of the things that I spoke about earlier, which are all helpful. So those flexible hours, the work from home, the support for and understanding of carer situations and all of those sorts of things. So I would say, if there is someone who's, recently widowed, and you could still be dealing with all of that trauma years later, but to think about like leveraging flexibility, whether it's hours work, look at your, do you have long service leave? You can take at half pay. The sick leave options that I spoke of earlier. I think all of these things are really incredibly helpful. And I do just want to share, because it's worked for us, that in my current role, and I will give them a plug. So I work for Tennis Australia at the moment, and they, through our wonderful CEO who's just about to move on, has supported me in introducing something that we've called Life Leave. And that allows for myself as the Chief People Officer, the Chief Financial Officer, and the person's, chief, they might be in the commercial team, for example, to grant additional leave for what life throws at you. So it's unlimited, to an extent, but I just felt after my own experience it was really important to try to shift something here. And I am in a role where I can influence this. And look, it's worked really well. And people have used it we called it life leave because it's not just for, if you lose a partner, people are, sitting at the bedside of could be their partner or their mum or their dad.
Yeah,
and it's something that that is unexpected. We've actually I had someone that was stuck on a ship out, out in the ocean somewhere for days. She's like, I just can't get back. And we've been able to use that. And I'm hoping that, it might be something that potentially could be a bit of a case study, or people could look at to go, well, it doesn't necessarily need to be enshrined in legislation, but I mean, that would be helpful. But, are there ways that organisations can support people during these times that allows for them to feel like the organisation's got their back, that they can return, but also that they've, there's some financial support there just while they get themselves back on their feet. So, yeah, it's been, it's still early. I've only been there for 3 years. So it's early days. It's probably been in place for 2 years. But it's almost my very, personal way of going, this needs to be addressed. It's just not enough. And I don't think employers are getting the best person coming back either, So I think it pays dividends for both the grieving person and for the organisation.
That sounds like a fantastic policy or shift, I guess, for an organisation. And as you say, Tennis Australia is obviously very large, but even for smaller businesses, just to think outside the square a bit, how can I potentially support someone coming back after bereavement or something, life-changing where, we don't have something in place currently?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I want to just return to sort of that juggle of work and family. How did you balance the demands of parenting and returning to work in sort of these high profile roles?
Sometimes I think not very well, but I look at my little people and they're all grown up to be good humans. So I did the best. I did the best that I could. But in really practical terms, and I know this isn't something that everyone can do, but I got an au pair, and actually that has, in hindsight, that was also so good for my kids. So we had, 3 different au pairs, from around the globe come and join this family full of, vitality, and, for them it was an adventure, and they were able to do the running around. Really, I just needed someone to help me before school and after school. And each of them brought something really lovely to our family. And in fact, my oldest son has just been travelling and staying with the au pairs back in Germany and Austria.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so they have definitely, I think in some cases I felt like I had a 4th child, but, just having someone there that you go, look, I'm running late, can you go and pick, Ellen up from here? Or it was great. So that was really good. The other thing I would say, which is just taking help when it's offered. Like, you don't have to do everything. And I've seen, some great just tips on our forums as well, where people say, takeaway is okay. Takeaway is okay.
Yes, it is. It is
takeaway
indeed.
is absolutely okay. Outsource what you can, if you can. And then I think, for me, it was really important to have times with the kids, and we would have family date night once a month that, might be at the movies, or we might just go for a walk, but it was, and still something that we do less so now, but we still have, like, at least I would say once a quarter we have a family date that is compulsory and everybody must come. And so just creating some of those moments of joy together. So yeah, look, it was tough. And as I said earlier, now at the other end of having my youngest now in completing her final year of school, I am exhausted.
Yeah.
and it takes its toll, but I'm really proud of them and I'm proud of me, and it's been almost a decade, but we got there. We got there.
Yeah. Look, I just reflecting off the back of that, I guess I'd like to know, is there something, probably many things, but something that stands out that surprised you about yourself and also your 3 children through this process? Maybe something you've discovered or something you've reclaimed?
I think, I'm just trying to find the word. Maybe joy. I think there's something where you feel like you're never going to
Yes.
feel joy again. And, I do feel joy, and I don't feel joy at the expense of Tim. He's always there. So I think what surprised me is that 2 things can be true, that you can really experience heartache and loss and be okay. I think that's and same with the kids, and we've all had bumps along the way, but their ability as I've been packing up things around the house, I gave them all a little package just yesterday with photos of when they were young, or photos with Tim, and having dinner last night, we were laughing about the most ridiculous things of remember the time when, and I love that they can look back at that time and look back at it with joy, not with loss. Like the loss is there, but they're looking through it from a lens of a really beautiful, happy memory. And I wouldn't have believed that could be true in those early days. So, I think that you can find and still have joy in your life is really important to know.
It's beautiful, Kate. Now, look, I like to finish each of these conversations with 3 questions. So I'll do the same with you, of course. I'd like to know, firstly, what do you and the kids like to do to remember Tim?
Oh, we have a couple of things. So Tim was notorious for his bad dressing. So we have Christmas Eve, so 23rd of December every year, where we have a group of friends who also partake in the ritual of wearing red socks. So Tim was known for red socks, like explorer socks and short shorts and boots. So we will do that 23rd of December, and raise a glass to him. I also find our anniversary, which is the 7th of April, so just past our wedding anniversary, and I don't wear my rings anymore, but on that day I always wear my engagement, eternity and wedding ring as my own little nod. That was our special day. That's our a few of our rituals.
Yeah, that's actually really unique as well, which I think is, the point, that everybody's story is unique. And so the way they may remember someone is also unique. You have been widowed for almost 9 years, as you pointed out. What's something that you say to someone who's newly widowed? And you've given lots of career advice, but perhaps more generally.
I would say let people help you. I also remember times thinking it's so annoying, but I think let people help you, because it's such a long road. Like it gets easier, but take all of the help. I would also say it is going to be okay. And I think, I've sort of touched on that a little in saying I certainly remember thinking this is, I'm never going to feel happy or joy or any of those positive emotions again. But it is going to be okay. And you think it's impossible, but there's a path through and the fog will lift.
And finally, we all turn to quotes while we're going through these sorts of moments. Is there a quote that resonates with you most at this point in your journey?
Yeah, I don't know who to attribute it to, but I found grief as an emotion incredibly interesting. And, I think being in HR too, people talk about the change curve and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, I don't know, that's not really my experience. But what I love the quote that is, grief is a profound, lasting expression of love after loss. And for me, that is, it helps me connect with my grief. Like it helps me connect with my love for Tim. So that's my go-to, is that, grief is the profound, lasting expression of love after loss.
I haven't heard that one before. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I did want to just touch on one last thing before I let you go, because we could talk for hours. But you mentioned that you've repartnered, and many do with Peter. How is that relationship evolved, and do you keep Tim as part of that?
Yeah, absolutely, we do. Yeah. So we've been together for almost 7 years now, Peter and I, and how's it evolved? Well, I can remember when he first came on the scene that my daughter in particular, he was staying the night and had bought an overnight bag, which she took and hid, and then she deleted him from my phone. But they are now like peas in a pod. So they love shopping together. She adores him. He has. I think this is. One of the things I love about Peter is that he has never sort of stepped into that space, which is Tim's, and I don't know how he knows where it is, but he's not tried to. He lets Tim live. So and he laughs about it sometimes. Where I've got quite an old house and it creaks and moans at times, and he'll go, "Oh, there's Timmy." So he's. I think also I don't know. I don't know if this is true, but he's a police officer, and I think he would have seen some things, and I think that the way that he's come into our family, which has been with grace and patience, has resonated with all of us. So it's lovely. It's lovely to have the opportunity to love and be loved again. And I don't think that anything in my heart has grown. It's like when you have a child, your heart gets bigger. So it's lovely that they can coexist in my heart and actually in the family. And funnily enough, Tim's stepchildren also have given me their stamp of approval with Peter. So,
oh gosh, I love it.
Yeah, and Tim's parents, who are still alive, they're in their 90s now, and they still live in Western Australia. And Peter and I were over there for the tennis in January, and they were like, "We'd really like to meet Peter. Can you bring him around?" So, it's been. I'm very fortunate that Tim's family have, continued to give us a big squeezy hug and let us, move forward. And I'm grateful for that too.
It's a wonderful story out of, something so tragic. Kate, I can't thank you enough for being part of the Widow Diaries, and also for all of your advice around returning to work. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. Really good to talk to you too.
Thank you to all my guests for sharing their stories so generously. The Widow Diaries is hosted and produced by me, Caroline Winter, from Pod Talk for First Light Widowed Support, which provides information, resources and connection for young widowed people throughout Australia. Follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and you can also find out more information at firstlight.org.au. This podcast acknowledges and celebrates the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which stories have been told for thousands of years, and on which this podcast is recorded.